right, so this has really got everyone talking.
Yeah.
An alleged assassination attempt on former President Trump. We've got, I mean, you send over like a whole stack of breaking news on this.
Yeah.
Let's dive in.
Absolutely.
See what we can uncover.
Yeah, we're looking at reports from, well, Fox News, the Times of Israel, the Daily Beast, Times Now, even the New York Post.
Wow.
All covering this incident at Trump's golf course in West Palm Beach.
Sunday on the Green definitely turned chaotic,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Absolutely.
So what's the very latest that we know?
Well, it seems like all sources are kind of agreeing on the suspect. A man named Wesley Routh. He was caught aiming an AK-47 at Trump. And what's really concerning is this wasn't just, a distant threat. Secret Service agents actually had to fire at Routh when he wouldn't lower the weapon.
Wow, that makes you think twice about, just how safe any public figure is in this day and age.
Yeah.
So was this, is there any indication, was this a planned attack, or was this the actions of someone who's just, profoundly troubled?
Well, it seems like there was an element of premeditation here.
Like,
because he fled the scene,
right?
which led to a car chase down I-95
Oh.
before he was apprehended.
Yeah.
And get this, authorities found a GoPro camera at the scene.
Really?
The Palm Beach County Sheriff was quoted saying Routh seemed intent on filming the entire event.
So, almost like he wanted to make this for an audience, or
Yeah, almost like staging this whole thing, which is really disturbing.
okay, that is disturbing. So, all right, let's talk about this Routh then.
Okay.
Who is he? What do we know about his background?
Well, the Daily Beast did some digging and found that he's 58 years old, seems to have lived in Hawaii, even owned a shed building company.
Okay.
So, pretty ordinary stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you start to look at his online activity,
And that's where it takes a turn.
And that's where it takes a turn.
The New York Post described it as a very, a confusing blend of seemingly contradictory viewpoints.
Right.
Some aligning with left-leaning causes, while others were just
Out there.
Yeah.
For example, during the primaries, it seems like he was, posting support for both Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley. Even urged them not to give up.
Interesting.
And then you have other posts about wanting to buy a rocket from Elon Musk
Right.
to target Putin.
Okay, so we've got this guy who builds sheds for a living,
Right.
and apparently gets lost in all sorts of online conspiracies, and then decides that he's going to take matters into his own hands. What could his motive possibly be?
I think that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
Unfortunately, none of the articles we have really give us, a clear answer yet.
Yeah.
But what we can do is analyze what we do know,
Right.
which at this point is primarily online activity, and see if that reveals any clues.
Okay, let's get into that.
Okay.
What else do we have?
Well, again, just looking at his digital footprint, it suggests this really deep engagement with current events. Although through a rather, unique lens.
Right.
One detail that really stood out was his very vocal support for Ukraine.
Interesting.
The New York Post even mentioned posts about wanting to send Afghan war veterans to go fight there.
So we've got this strange mix of potentially volatile political views combined with what sounds like a very warped sense of heroism.
Right.
It's kind of like we're trying to solve a puzzle, but the pieces don't quite fit.
Yeah, it's complex, to say the least. Whether this act, if it does turn out to be premeditated, was driven by political fanaticism, mental instability, a misguided attempt to become some kind of vigilante, I don't know. That's something that, investigators are going to have to try to untangle.
Yeah. It makes you think twice, right? About, what's really going on beneath the surface, especially now with, online platforms, and how prominent they are.
Yeah.
And how that really can shape people's worldviews.
Absolutely. That's a really important observation and something we definitely need to explore further.
Yeah.
It seems like his online activity, again, if it is his, reveals a very distorted view of reality.
Right.
Fueled by, this mix of information and, frankly, misinformation.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, right?
Right.
Because, how do we as a society even begin to address that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's maybe delve a little bit deeper into the possible security implications of this incident.
Okay.
And what this means, for the safety of other high-profile figures.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
What are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, I think, the fact that someone with it seems such a confused ideology was able to get within, firing range of a former president
Right.
really raises some serious questions about, security protocols
Yeah, for sure.
and how these things are handled.
Absolutely. I mean, this wasn't just some, like, vague threat from afar.
Right.
This was an active situation where, I mean, if not for the really quick actions of the Secret Service,
Yeah.
this could have ended tragically.
Absolutely. And I think it also, it challenges those common assumptions that we hear, that, these kinds of threats primarily come from, one end of the political spectrum or the other.
Right, right.
This really kind of throws that out the window a little bit.
You're right, you're right. If his online activity is anything to go by, it really does throw a wrench in those preconceived notions.
Yeah.
Like, it forces us to look at the fact that it's not always so black and white.
Right.
The motivations behind these acts.
Exactly.
They're rarely clear-cut.
Trying to fit every incident like this into, one neat little box, whether it's political or ideological,
Oh, yeah.
it really kind of, I think, oversimplifies a very complex issue.
Right, and this is where, those online echo chambers that we were talking about,
Yeah.
they come back into play.
Absolutely.
I was like, people are just bombarded
Mhm.
with so much information from so many different sources.
Yeah.
It becomes difficult to separate fact from fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit on a really crucial point here. We talked about, the potential for online platforms to, to influence people's worldviews.
Right.
But, this incident really throws a spotlight on, I think, the darker side of that influence.
Right, because it's not just about, like, forming your opinions anymore. Right. It's about potentially driving people to then act on those opinions in really extreme ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it almost makes you wonder, like, where do we go from here? What can we learn from this?
Right.
Not just, I mean, from a security standpoint, but,
Right.
but about this potential for online radicalization.
Right. I mean, that's the million-dollar question. I think this will undoubtedly, force law enforcement, intelligence agencies
Right.
to kind of reassess how they, identify and address these potential threats, particularly those that, might not fit those traditional profiles.
Right, especially in the digital age.
Exactly.
Gone are the days when you could just, monitor extremist groups or track physical movements.
Right.
Now you have individuals like, like Routh, who may not, fit into those molds,
Right.
but still, pose a very real threat.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the job of, of those who are tasked with ensuring the safety and security of high-profile individuals infinitely more difficult. But beyond that, I think, it raises these broader societal questions about how we navigate this, this new world where extreme views, can fester and spread like wildfire, in these online spaces.
Yeah. And it makes you think about the responsibility of these social media platforms as well.
Exactly.
Well-
This isn't just about freedom of speech.
Right.
It's about, the ethical considerations of providing a platform for, potentially dangerous rhetoric.
Right.
Do these companies have a responsibility to more actively moderate the content on their sites?
Right.
How do you balance that with, concerns about censorship?
Right.
I mean, these are difficult questions and there's no easy answers.
Right.
But they're questions that I think we can no longer afford to ignore.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Yeah, this whole incident, it feels like we're kind of witnessing, like, the real world consequences
Right.
of something that's been, brewing in these online spaces for years now.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, is this a tipping point?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But what I do know is that this incident has really thrust these issues into the spotlight
Yeah.
in a way that I don't think we've really seen before.
Yeah.
This isn't just a news story,
Right.
This is, I think, a stark reminder of the power of these online platforms,
Yeah.
the speed at which misinformation can spread,
Right.
and the very real consequences that can unfold when those virtual worlds then collide with our own.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, but stick with us.
Okay.
We'll be back in a moment to kind of delve into what this all means for, for all of us,
Okay.
and what we can do to navigate this increasingly complex landscape.
Sounds good.
Don't go anywhere. And we are back. Still unpacking this attempted assassination of
Yeah.
former President Trump. and really trying to make sense of what it all means because, I mean,
It's a lot.
this incident has so many layers,
Yeah,
right? I
absolutely.
mean, you've got the security concerns, the potential for this, like online radicalization,
Right.
the role of these social media platforms.
Yeah,
It's like we
yeah.
stumbled into this like tangled web and we're just starting to kind of like untangle the threads.
Yeah, for sure.
So for our listeners out there who, like us are trying to wrap their heads around this,
Yeah.
what
Oh.
would you say is like the key takeaway that they should kind of hold on to as this story continues to develop?
I think the most important thing to remember here is we're still in the very early stages of understanding this event. And I think, there's this natural tendency for people to, grasp for those quick explanations, the easy answers.
Right.
But I think the reality is, it's far more nuanced and complex than that.
Right. It's so easy to get caught up in like the
Absolutely.
swirl of like breaking news and the instant analysis.
Right.
But you're right.
Yeah.
We really do have to like try to be patient,
Yeah.
let the investigation unfold.
Let the authorities do their job, gather all the facts, and really, piece together that, comprehensive picture of what led up to this.
Right.
And I think in the meantime, I think it's also crucial for all of us, listening
Right.
to kind of resist that urge to jump to conclusions
Right.
or, spread misinformation, things like that,
You've given us a lot to think about here.
Oh, sure.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up this deep dive?
Well, I think, this incident, as disturbing as it is,
Right.
it can be a wake-up call, I think.
Yeah.
It highlights the importance of, critical thinking,
Right.
media literacy, and, really trying to engage in respectful dialogue, even when we're faced with, differing viewpoints.
Because ultimately we are all in this together.
We are.
And I think understanding these forces that are shaping our world,
Yeah.
both online and offline,
Right.
it's really crucial if we're going to, navigate these challenges that are ahead of us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Okay.
Huge thank you to our expert
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
for guiding us through this really complex and ever-evolving story.
Absolutely.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive
Yes.
into such a critical and timely issue. And until next time, stay curious, stay
Something
informed,
say
and stay engaged.